This was the largest, most expensive, and most extreme joint police and military manhunt in America since 9/11. A million residents of Boston were placed under a mandatory order to stay inside and shelter in place. Over 1,000 law enforcement officers flooded into Boston, all searching for one wounded, isolated 19-year-old college student. So, how did this actually happen? On the 15th of April, 2013, Boston hosted the 117th running of the Boston Marathon. 23,000 runners took to the course, with hundreds of thousands of spectators lining both sides of Boylston Street to cheer them on. At 2:49 p.m., most of the elite runners had already crossed the finish line, leaving mostly families and people waiting for loved ones along the street. Without warning, a bomb went off. Just 12 to 14 seconds later, a second bomb detonated in the crowd. Both devices were built the same way: modified pressure cookers packed with black powder, ball bearings, and nails, sealed inside black backpacks, and planted ahead of time in the most crowded spots. The bombs were positioned with brutal precision, at knee to ankle height, designed to maximize crippling injuries. The attack left a devastating toll. 3 people killed instantly, 281 injured, 16 of whom lost limbs, including a 7-year-old, the youngest amputee. A 23-year-old Chinese graduate student at Boston University was among the dead. Her family back home learned of her death in real time, watching the news broadcast with no warning at all. The blast site stretched across 15 blocks of Boylston Street, and thousands of investigators rushed in to comb the scene. Massive amounts of surveillance footage became the key to cracking the case. After scanning thousands of hours of footage from storefronts, building cameras, and bystanders' phones, police finally found the critical clip: 2 men carrying oversized backpacks, moving through the crowd near the finish line, walking away afterward with empty bags. 3 days later, the FBI held an emergency press conference, releasing high-resolution surveillance images of 2 suspects and warning the public that both men were armed and extremely dangerous. Within hours, the photos had spread across the internet, and the public quickly identified the suspects: 26-year-old Tamerlan and 19-year-old Dzhokhar. The brothers were from Kyrgyzstan and had lived in Cambridge, near Boston, for over a decade. Tamerlan, the older brother, held a U.S. green card and had once been an amateur boxer. Dzhokhar, the younger brother, was already a naturalized U.S. citizen and a sophomore at UMass at the time. He was described as quiet but well-liked, someone his classmates saw as a completely normal young guy. The investigation later confirmed the brothers had learned to build the bombs from Al-Qaeda's online propaganda magazine. Their motive was revenge for U.S. military actions in Muslim countries in the Middle East, a fact Dzhokhar later confirmed himself in a handwritten confession. When the wanted photos were released, the brothers were watching the live press conference from their home in Cambridge. For 4 full hours after the images went public, they completely vanished from police radar. That night at 10:24 p.m. on the MIT campus, 27-year-old campus police officer Sean Collier was sitting alone in his patrol car. He had no connection to the marathon bombing investigation and was simply on routine duty. The Tsarnaev brothers walked straight up to his car and shot him at point-blank range multiple times. Sean died on the spot. They tried to steal his service weapon, but a built-in security lock on the holster stopped them. They fled on foot. Shortly after, the brothers carjacked a driver at a gas station in Cambridge, forcing him to drive for 30 minutes. When the car pulled into a Shell station in Watertown, the driver made a break for it while Dzhokhar was inside buying supplies, jumping out and calling police immediately. The hijacked car had OnStar tracking installed, letting police follow its exact location the entire time. The final showdown was about to begin. At 12:20 a.m., Watertown police intercepted the vehicle, and a fierce firefight broke out instantly. A 7-minute gun battle shattered the quiet of the residential neighborhood. The brothers threw pipe bombs and more pressure cooker devices as they went, with Tamerlan firing continuously with a 9mm handgun. Police later recovered 56 shell casings from the scene. Wounded by multiple gunshots, Tamerlan charged at officers in a physical struggle before being subdued by tactical units. In the chaos, Dzhokhar drove the stolen car at full speed straight into the police line, running his own brother over in the process to break through. The car dragged Tamerlan's body nearly 10 meters before crashing and losing control. Dzhokhar abandoned the car, wounded, and disappeared into the dark streets of Watertown. The firefight also left a transit police officer critically wounded by friendly fire, nearly bleeding to death. Tamerlan was taken to the hospital, where he died from severe gunshot wounds and blunt force trauma. Dzhokhar, now alone and bleeding from gunshot wounds, had no car, no phone, and no plan. yet somehow stayed hidden despite police locking down the entire area. Over 1,000 heavily armed officers, police helicopters equipped with thermal imaging, and federal and local emergency resources from across the country moved into position. Police planned a grid search of Watertown's 20 blocks, checking every house, every garage, every shed, and every basement. By dawn on April 19, police had a full perimeter locked down. At 6 a.m., the governor of Massachusetts issued a mandatory shelter-in-place order covering Boston and 5 surrounding communities, including Watertown, Cambridge, and Newton. Residents everywhere were told to stay home, lock their doors, and not leave. Anyone other than police was barred from knocking on doors or entering homes. Homeland Security experts pointed out that the U.S. had never carried out this level of citywide lockdown to catch a single fugitive. The entire city ground to a halt. Public transit shut down completely. Sporting events were canceled, businesses closed their doors, and 1 million people stayed home in near silence. Highway signs looped the same shelter-in-place message on repeat, and Boston turned into a ghost town. The search continued around the clock, with multiple agencies working in coordinated zones, breaking down doors, checking every corner of every property, while helicopters overhead scanned nonstop with thermal cameras, hunting for any sign of body heat. Everyone was convinced that a badly wounded, bleeding suspect would eventually give himself away. But everyone missed one critical blind spot. Dzhokhar hadn't kept running. He'd quietly crawled into a boat parked in someone's backyard. That 24-foot fiberglass boat belonged to David Hinneberry, a 66-year-old retired telecom technician. The boat had been wrapped in white shrink wrap for the winter and sat on a trailer in his backyard, less than half a mile from where his brother had died in the shootout. Well inside the police's core search zone, the thick hull and the outer shrink wrap completely blocked Dzhokhar's faint body heat from detection. For a full 16 hours, police helicopters flew low over that exact boat multiple times with thermal cameras, and never once picked up a heat signature inside. Later economic estimates showed that a single day of lockdown cost the greater Boston area over $300 million. By evening, days of searching had turned up nothing. No leads, no sightings, no progress, and the exhausted search teams were running on empty. At 6 p.m. that night, the governor lifted the shelter-in-place order, and the city slowly began to reopen. After a tense, exhausting day, Boston finally caught its breath. During the lockdown, David had already noticed something odd about the boat in his backyard. The weatherproof cover had come loose, and the outer shrink wrap looked strangely torn and unsettled. With the entire city under lockdown, he hadn't been able to go check it out. The moment the order lifted, he headed straight to the backyard to inspect the boat. The instant he climbed up, he saw blood smeared across the deck. Moving around to the engine side, he spotted a man, barely conscious, hidden deep inside the boat. David rushed back inside and called 911 immediately. In a later interview, he admitted that coming face to face with a terrorist at close range and walking away unharmed felt like nothing short of a miracle. Within minutes of the call, the block was locked down again. Police used a robotic arm to peel back the shrink wrap, and thermal imaging finally confirmed a live signal inside the boat. Negotiators moved in to talk him out, while flashbang grenades were used to apply tactical pressure. After a 2-hour standoff, at 8:45 p.m. that night, Dzhokhar raised his hands and surrendered. Police arrested him on the spot. Crowds gathered behind the police line, and officers on scene spontaneously broke into cheers and applause. David, the boat owner whose quick thinking led to the capture, refused all public donations offered to him, insisting every dollar go instead to the bombing victims. He never accepted being called a hero, describing himself simply as an ordinary guy who happened to notice something wrong. Dzhokhar was taken to the same hospital where his brother had died. A gunshot wound to the head left him with permanent speech impairment. 3 days after his arrest, he was formally charged in his hospital room with using a weapon of mass destruction to carry out an act of terrorism. Meanwhile, MIT held a memorial service for Officer Sean Collier, attended by thousands, and the school later placed a memorial at the site where he was killed. A young officer with no connection to the Marathon bombing case had become, for no reason at all, a target of an extremist violence. In March 2015, the trial officially began. Dzhokhar's defense attorneys didn't deny that he'd committed the crimes. They argued instead that he'd been under his older brother's psychological control for years. That April, the jury found him guilty on all counts. In May, he was sentenced to death. The legal proceedings that followed took several turns. In 2020, a federal appeals court overturned the death sentence, citing flaws in the jury selection process. In 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court voted 6-3 to reinstate the death sentence. As of 2026, Dzhokhar remains on death row at the federal Supermax prison in Colorado, and his legal appeals are still ongoing.